Johnny Gaudreau had a down season offensively for the Blue Jackets and was still arguably their MVP. So let's talk about that and how he can get better next season on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I also have to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I have a competitive side and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends, download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. So we're going to talk about Johnny Gaudreau today. We're going to do his season review. We're going to talk about how good was his season. I see a lot of people talking about how it was a disappointing season for Johnny Gaudreau and how the team needs him to be better and stuff. And I'm seeing a lot of negativity about his season because he only had 11 goals, I believe, maybe 12. But we're going to talk about all of that. I want to talk about the good first. And that is just kind of plain and simple. And that's that Johnny Gaudreau put up more points than anyone else on the Blue Jackets. And like on this Blue Jackets team as well, like there's a lot to do there. You know, this team was miserable. It was bad to watch. It was disappointing. And I get being disappointed by Johnny Gaudreau, but the fact of the matter is he was one of the best players on this team. Basically all season long. And he had cold stretches and he had moments where it felt like he wasn't doing anything. But if you look at the numbers, and I'm going to consult the numbers specifically in a second here, like he was still creating a ton of offense for this team. No one was doing anything with it though. And like he was like spent large parts of this season at top 10 in the league in creating offense. So like expected goals for and like expected like shot assists. Expected shot assists is not what the stat is called, but I can't think what the stat's called off the top of my head. I'm trying to pull the numbers up now because again, Jay didn't have the stats that he needed. My point is Johnny Gaudreau should have had better numbers this year, and the fact that he didn't isn't necessarily on him. It's the fact that like his most consistent line mate was Boone Jenner. Like those two guys were pretty solidly glued together for most of the season while Jenner was in the lineup. At least, obviously, he missed some time due to personal issues at the end of the season, and he had a broken hand. Kind of around about the 30 game mark, I want to say he missed a few games. But like, I don't know what you want this guy. I don't know what you want this guy to do. He's doing the best he possibly can in this situation, you know. And I think what a lot of people are perhaps critical of is he took the he had 115 points in his final season with the Calgary Flames, and I think a lot of people were expecting 100 points for him on the Blue Jackets as well. And then you look at like who he was playing with on the Flames, like him and Matthew Tkachuk were basically attached at the hip. Elias Lindholm was the third person on that line. Those three guys have been split up. And I would argue that Matthew Tkachuk is probably having the best performance out of all three of those players. I think possibly there's an argument that he is the best player out of those three players. But look at who he's playing with in Florida versus who Johnny Gaudreau has been playing with this season. And like, what are we supposed to do at this point? You know, I'm looking at, I finally pulled up his numbers. His goals, like his expected goals were one of the highest on the team. He was at 5-on-5 anyway. Just pulling up that because power plays don't count. Because like they do count, but also, you know, Johnny Gaudreau was creating shot attempts like nobody's business. In terms of like his not shot attempts, shot assist attempts, I guess, is again the best. It's not quite what the stat is called, but it is what I'm calling it. His high danger expected goals his high danger expected goals was 4.63, which was second on the team. You know, he was creating a lot of offense. He was, if you take the guys that played one whole game out of it, he was second in on ice expected goals percentage for the entire team, and that's not nothing, you know. So the short story here is, yes, Johnny Gaudreau underperformed, but he was still arguably the best player on the team. And he was doing that with, like I said, a rotating cast of line mates. Like, there was large portions of the season where the top line right wing was Jack Roslovic or Justin Danforth. And, like, I like Justin Danforth fine. He's a perfectly cromulent player. He's not a top line winger. And the fact that, like, Johnny had to play with all of these guys just in and out, and didn't really like that. I think was part of the reason that the Flames had so much success with the Lindholm, Gaudreau, Kachuk line, is that they basically glued those three guys together, and that was what the line was. You know, it wasn't, and partially this is, you know, it's not necessarily coaching issues. They've had injuries, they've had inconsistencies. Like, for whatever reason, Johnny Gaudreau and Patrick Laine just don't have chemistry together, which is weird because they should. Like, they should have a ton of chemistry together. It's the playmaker shooter combo, you know, and they really just needed a guy in between that. But for whatever reason, those two guys just don't work together. You can't have them on the same line. And there's only so much that this team could do with that. I'm looking here. So the most minutes that he played this season was with Jenna and Roslovic. He played 237 minutes with them. Expected goals for percentage for that line was the highest of the expected goals for of that line is the highest of any forward line on the team by about 4 goals. So, like, again, creating offense and nothing is really happening with it. You know, it's frustrating. I get it, you know. I don't think that you can put that on Gaudreau and say, well, he had a down season. He only had 11 goals when you look at what he was working with, you know, and he still had, I think he had 5 times as many assists as he had goals this season. But, you know, give or take a handful of assists. I believe if you took just his assists, he'd still be like second on the team in scoring, is the thing. I think the only person that would have more points than him if you just took his assists would be Zach Werenski. And I am correct in that. Pulling up the numbers here. So Johnny Gaudreau had 60 points this season. And he had 12 goals. If you take his goals away, he had 48 assists. Zach Werenski had 57 points. The next guy was Kirill Marchenko, who had 42. So even if you take away his 12 goals, he still would have been second on the team in scoring, which is wild to me. Now, admittedly, he was one of only a handful of guys that played over 75 games this season. So, like, is that a fair example? Maybe not. But if you take points per game, he was still second on the team in points per game. He was almost at 3/4 of a point per game. Zach Werenski leads the way for guys that played more than one game. Luca Talbot loses at the top because he had a goal in the one assist. He had 1 goal in the one game that he played. So he's leading the team right now, which is very funny. But Werenski leads the way for players that actually played like a reasonable amount of time this season. Johnny Gaudreau second. Hilariously, Alex Nylander is third on the team in points per game, which again we'll get to him in a minute. And that may have been the only time this season that Gaudreau had like a consistent winger, and it was Alex Nylander, who no one was expecting to do anything. So we'll talk about that in a second here. I want to kind of get into who Johnny Gaudreau played hockey with this season a little bit more, and who he should maybe play with next season, because that's going to be an interesting conversation, I think. First, I got to tell you about Monopoly Go, because I play this game literally all the time. I've been playing it for months. I love it. It's so compelling in a way that I can't really put into words. But it's the regular Monopoly that you love, but it's on your phone anytime. There's tons of new twists. They've got leaderboards so you can compare your progress to your buddies, which I love to compare myself to my buddies. There's so much to do. There's a bunch of different boards that you can even play on, a bunch of different designs. You can bankrupt your friends by smashing all of their landmarks with a wrecking ball. You can charge other players rent for your iconic properties, and you can work with your friends as well if that's what you want. Crack open community tests, work together in tournaments to get extra rewards, and climb that leaderboard. Get back out there, put on your game face, download Monopoly Go free on the App Store or Google Play. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We're going to ignore that I just played the outro video instead of the end of ad video. It's fine. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I want to talk about the bad of Johnny Gaudreau's season. And again, this is something that is not necessarily all his fault. And I want to look more into this when I'm not like live on YouTube about it. But there were stretches of the season where Johnny Gaudreau kind of disappeared. And like I'm looking, mostly this is goals. But he went pointless for 5 games in the middle of January. He went goalless in several games to start the season. He didn't score his first goal until November 2nd. In the month of October, he only had 4 points in the 9 games. So like he had a slow start. Again, like the team was disappointing, but he scored that goal on November 2nd and then didn't score again until November 18th, November 26th. And then, he went between December 29th and February 21st, he didn't score a goal, So, like, the inconsistent play is not necessarily, like, a whole thing, because I think he was still playing well in those games, and he was still getting assists, So, like, he had 3 multi-point nights in between his goal streak. Scored, I think, had assists in every game except that 5-game pointless streak, and then another 2-game pointless streak. But like, I get it. I get being frustrated by Johnny Gaudreau's season. You want the guy that you're paying $9 million to have more than 12 goals on the year. Like he's a former 40 goal scorer for Calgary, and even last year he was scoring more than he was scoring more than this year. I think probably less than people expected. He had 21 goals last year and 53 assists. So like again, he had a down year this year from last year. And I think a lot of people were expecting kind of the numbers from that season with the Flames, where he had 40 goals. Matthew Tkachuk had 40 goals. Elias Lindholm, I think, hit 30 goals that season. Like, they were one of the best lines in hockey, and I think people were hoping that Gaudreau could recreate that with Line A and literally whoever on Columbus. It didn't happen that way. But he's making a lot of money, and I get being frustrated. Almost 10 million. I thought it was 8.75. It's not. It's 9.75 for the next, like, 5 seasons. So he is he's here for the long haul, like it or not. And I see a lot of people kind of complaining that and begrudging that, and I get it. I get being frustrated, and I get being like, we should get rid of Gaudreau, but then you don't. Like, the fact of the matter is, like, this team is worse if you don't have Johnny Gaudreau on it. You're not going to get good value right now I don't understand. People are like, well, Gaudreau shouldn't be on the team next year. Burn it down. Trade everyone over the age of 25 or whatever. And like, on one hand, I kind of get it, but on the other hand, like, that's not really how this is gonna work, you know. And I don't know. I see this a lot with Jenna and Line A as well. Of like, we should just trade Jenna and Line A and start again and like start the rebuild again. And I'm like, but we're not. We haven't finished the rebuild yet, you know? If the team is still bad, like if the team is a lottery pick next season, then yeah, I think you have to start having that kind of conversation. But as of right now, the team is building. And I think Gaudreau is a guy that you want to not necessarily build around, but he's young enough that it's not a case of he's not old guy without a cup, you know? And it's not a case of we should trade him to get young value, because again, like he's of an age and he's at a point in his career where I think he can be a really, really good player on a young team, you know, and he could be a good player that is maybe not that like elite franchise star that a lot of people wanted him to be, even though he's being paid like that. But get him. But hey, on the other hand, maybe get him some real line mates, and you'll see. And we're going to kind of talk about that in a little bit, because I have some ideas on who Johnny Gaudreau should play with next year. But if you look at like his on ice stuff this season, his on ice stats, like I get being disappointed because he was frustrating at times, despite the fact that he was the second best player on the team in terms of shot attempt advantage. He was at 55% through the entire regular season. That's at all strengths. So we're taking power play efficiency into that. If I switch it to just even strength, hilariously, Cameron Butler is at the top of the list for Corsi for percentage. He played 54 seconds. There was 2 shot attempts while he was on the ice and 0 against. So he gets to finish the season with a 100% Corsi for percentage, which is very funny. His number drops if you take the power play out of it. So he drops down to 10th on the team, or 9th if you take Cameron Butler out of it at 49%. But that's still top half of the team. I would want that to be better, but I get the frustration with him. And I think a lot of people wanted more from him than he showed this season, which, again, not necessarily his fault. I think it didn't help that, like, whenever he was on the ice, there was kind of a defensive nightmare. So the expected goals percentage of when he was on the ice, and this is, again, at even strength, is only 47%. He was on the ice for 65 expected goals for and 73 expected goals against. You know, like he was creating a ton of offense, but he was also giving up a lot of offense. And that's he's never going to be like the defensive stalwart player that I think a lot of people wanted him to be. And he needs to be better in his own zone. He needs to be a 200-foot player. And like he kind of is a 200-foot player, but not in the way that I think a lot of people describe that. He's very, very good in transition. But for him to have success, I think you're going to need a player that is solid defensively and a player that can score goals. And so I have some ideas on who he could play with next season. So let's talk about that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I've got to tell you all about Indeed, and I'm going to stop hitting the wrong videos when I do my transitions. But when you're drafting your fantasy team, do you ever wish you could handpick the best stars for your business team? If you're building your talent roster, you need Indeed. It's the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills. You can do it all with Indeed. Find top talent fast with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like matching assessments, virtual interviews. Do you hate waiting? Indeed's instant US data shows over 80% of Indeed employers find quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description at the moment they sponsor a job. Indeed is the only site I use when I'm unlucky enough to be job hunting, and I just think it's the best one. It's easy to use, it gives me the best options, and I can only imagine that if you are hiring, it does all of those things as well. So if I was hiring, I would definitely be using Indeed. They know when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/locked-on to start hiring now. Indeed.com/locked-on. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing is not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day every single day. And Johnny Gaudreau, who should he play with next season? Like, what do I want to see out of Johnny Gaudreau next season? And like, the answer is more goals. But I think giving him real line mates will probably help with that. Like his Boone Jenner is a perfectly fine line mate, but I don't. And like, he and Gaudreau have good chemistry, and I think they work well together. But you can't have Boone Jenner that high in the lineup because, well, for a bunch of reasons. My kind of joking answer about who Johnny Gaudreau should play with next season is that, well, you put him with Adam Fantilli, obviously. Adam Fantilli is the number one center on this team, or he should be. If Pascal Vincent knows anything, which is up for debate as we discussed in yesterday's episode. But you had, for my money, depending on the draft lottery outtake, which my answer might change if the Blue Jackets win the draft lottery. Adam Fantilli has to be put in a position this season to be that number one center. He has to show that he can be that number one center. No more of this playing him on like second line left wing nonsense. You bring him back, you put him at center, you play him with Gaudreau, and then like honestly, you try Gavin Brindley on the other wing. You try and see if you can recreate that success that they had in college together. Gavin Brindley is a very good defensive forward. He can also put the puck in the net. Adam Fantilli can put the puck in the net. Those two play really well together. And I think Johnny Gaudreau having good, consistent line mates can only be a good thing. My other option for this is, I have a couple of options, is if the Blue Jackets win the lottery, maybe Gaudreau and Celebrini is an option that you explore next season, and then put someone like Kirill Marchenko on that other wing, or someone like Kent Johnson, perhaps, on that other wing. And then, or you put Kent Johnson up with Fantilli and Brindley, and you put, I think Marchenko is the best option for that line. I think Gaudreau and Marchenko have very good chemistry together. And like, I wouldn't hate the concept of a Gaudreau, Jenner, Marchenko line. I just don't know that Boone Jenner is a top six forward on this team. Or he shouldn't be. If this team is firing on all cylinders, like, Boone Jenner should be a third line guy, and that's not a knock on Boone Jenner, but you're not going to win in this league with Boone Jenner as one of your top two centermen. The other option I have, which is if they don't win the lottery, they don't get Celebrini. Put Cole Sillinger with Johnny Gaudreau and Marchenko. I think Cole Sillinger showed huge steps of growth this season in becoming a really good two-way center. I think he obviously got all of those tough matchups at the end of the season, and I think he thrived in them for the most part. I think he dominant? No, but he avoided getting actively eaten alive by guys like Nate McKinnon, and so I think that's a really good sign. I think he has potential, and I wouldn't hate like a Gaudreau, Sillinger, Marchenko second line, and I know that Gaudreau is being paid like a first liner, but like, frankly, I think if everything goes well next season, the Blue Jackets could conceivably have two lines that they're like, well, either one of these lines is the top line. We're just going to rotate them as and when we want, and I think that's so, like, there's a bunch of options for Gaudreau to play with, but if next season, if you're going to start trotting out, the Gaudreau, Jenner, Nylander line, or the Gaudreau, Danforth, Nylander line, or like if you're going to, for God only knows why, try Line at center and do like Gaudreau, Line, Nylander, or something like that. Like we're going to be exactly the same place that we were this season, which is everyone's going to be complaining about Johnny Gaudreau underperforming and not looking at who he's playing with. I should have gone back to look at what we gave, what grade we gave Johnny Gaudreau last season. I want to say that it was an A or an A minus, and I am going to drop that grade. I think he gets a B this year. Arguably, just like I could make an argument for a lower grade, but I think a B is fine. I think it's acceptable. I think leading the team in points. I think creating lots of opportunities that just don't, that nothing gets done with, I think is, you can't blame him for someone else not putting the puck in the net, you know? So I'm going to give him credit for the offense that he was creating, and just hope that next season they can give him someone that, like, can put the puck in the damn net once in a while, you know? He got flashes of that this season, but if you give Johnny Gaudreau better line mates, you're going to see a better Johnny Gaudreau. And that's not like, I think a lot of people think that elite players should be able to carry lines all by themselves. And I think some players are capable of that. You know, you look at Sidney Crosby, for example, and I'm not, before anyone comes for me, I'm not comparing Johnny Gaudreau to Sidney Crosby in a caliber of player. Because Sidney Crosby is the kind of player that, we saw it this season, he basically decided that the Penguins were making the playoffs and almost made it happen all by himself. You know, you could put literally anyone on his wings and he would still be incredible. Connor McDavid is another guy. Put anyone on it. You put me on Connor McDavid's wing and I'd probably score 30 goals, you know? Gaudreau is a star player. He's not a player that can carry a line all by itself. I think if you give him a better line mate, I think you're going to see a much better Johnny Gaudreau. And I think we're going to be having very different conversation about Johnny Gaudreau, kind of coming into the season based on who he's playing with. At the end of next season, I think we'll be having a very different discussion about Johnny Gaudreau and his contract, because there's still potential there, I think, for him to be that 100-point player that he was in Calgary in Columbus. He had 60 points this year playing with literally whoever, you know? He had 74 points last season, and it was the same thing. It was him and a bunch of AHL guys. So, like, there's still a potential there. You know, you get him with a guy that can put the puck in the net that's not Patrick Laine, and you watch him go. Like, maybe you glue him and Marchenko together and then figure out who's going in the middle of that line. You know, there's potential here with Gaudreau. So I'm giving him a B, and I'm expecting better next season. Not better of Gaudreau specifically, just better in general, better line mates, better numbers, better everything. That, you know, some of these things are kind of on with getting. I think it's easy to say that Gaudreau needs to be better, but I think if you surround him with better line mates, you'll see a better Gaudreau, and that's what it is, you know. We'll finish off. Quick comment from Tom Boyd on who's watching live. Which more players were local? I think a physical guy like Kuraly could help keep Johnny clear, and he and Nylander can move the puck where it needs to go. I almost agree. I think, again, if you're putting Kuraly and Nylander with Johnny Gaudreau, you're already fighting that losing battle, because Johnny Gaudreau should not be playing, like, those are bottom six guys, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think Kuraly does a great job, and we'll talk about him in his season review, like, about how, like, the kind of season that he had. Nylander, I think we're going to see probably revert a little bit back to type next season, or who knows, maybe this is who Nylander really is, and we're going to see how he's actually more on par with his brother than you think. He just got brutally mismanaged at the beginning of his career because he played for Buffalo. But, like, for my money, Kuraly and Nylander are both bottom six players next season. Johnny Gaudreau should be in the top six. So, like, I on one hand, I agree. I think giving them, and this is kind of my point to Fantilli. I think Fantilli has that top six edge, and he also has, he'll throw his weight around a little bit, not too much, and I think he could probably get better at being a little more physical. But I think he's not afraid to get involved in that kind of thing, and I think that could be really interesting. I think Adam Fantilli also creates space for other players. Players are drawn to him. I think he creates space, and I think that's where Johnny Gaudreau could really thrive. And then he passes the puck, and then Marchenko just finishes it off, because that's what Marchenko does. That's kind of what I've got for today. We're not going to have an episode tomorrow because it's the weekend, apparently, already. Monday, we'll be back with, I believe we'll be doing another Monsters Monday as they start their playoff run next week. So Dina Weinheimer will be back, and we'll be talking to her all about guys like Luca Bonelli, who's practicing with the team right now, which is very exciting, and Trey Fix-Wolansky, and all of those guys. So we'll be talking about the Monsters on Monday. Thank you for listening to this episode, for making it your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms, on YouTube and on SiriusXM. Thank you for listening. I've been Jay Foster. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, you can email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Until tomorrow, or until Monday, make sure you stay Locked On.